Coming up on Gamers Week podcast. All right, next up from Games Radar, Alan Wake 2 composer violated one piano with adult toys to create the horror game's nightmarish soundscape.
Just go into the adult shop and they're like, "What are you looking for?" I'm just browsing for right now. Do you have anything that would fit inside of a piano? And that's not the weirdest question they had that day.
Wow, that loose, huh?
I really like the coding language they used.
See, these developers decided to use C++, but in all reality, they should have been using Visual Basic.
What?
Everybody knows all the best games are made in Cobalt.
It's the best language. I'm very proud of it.
It has the best code.
The best code we've ever seen. When I was president, we were using Cobalt all the time.
Please make this the soft open.
I was absolutely going to, and just, waiting for the massive blowback from all the Cobalt fans angry at the associations you're making. Like, what the fuck?
How f***ing dare you?
We had one of the best economies under my presidency because of our programmers developing in Cobalt.
Sir, they haven't used Cobalt since like 1994.
It's okay, because I thought Frederick Douglass was still alive.
I'm just now learning of this.
And that's the most political we'll ever get.
Yeah.
All right. Are you ready to start this party?
Let's do it.
Woo-hoo!
Welcome to Gamers Week podcast. Like the name says, we analyze the best, worst, and weirdest headlines of the past week in the video game industry. This is episode 113, and today is Wednesday, March 6th, 2024. Thanks so much for tuning in, everyone. My name is Blue Williams, and I'll be your host for this evening. But of course, I am not alone. I am joined by two fine co-hosts. My first co-host is a silver medalist in his Masters Hockey League program, where his team recently lost their title to the Pee Wee team, the Newborn Nippers, who had to still count the score on their fingers. Please say hello to the one and only Donnie G.
The other night, I participated in my son's end-of-season parents versus kids hockey game, and I thought I was going to have a heart attack after the first shift. It has been years since I have been on the ice, and I thought I was still 20 years old. I went full speed ahead, and I could not catch my breath after the first shift. And, I had even thought about getting back into playing like recreational ice hockey, and that kind of solidified the fact that I'm not going to do that. So, yeah.
And Donnie, today's VIP is dedicated to you.
Oh, wow. I'm
well, only because of this story now, though. It wasn't intended that way, but it'll be dedicated to you.
I'm an afterthought. Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're just relevant at this point.
And yes, if you haven't guessed by the sound of his lovely voice, my second co-host is back. Although he is currently in the Witness Protection Program after his Taylor Swift cosplay was so convincing that it led to a night of passion with Travis Kelce. And now Taylor has her throngs of Swifties out for his blood. We are so happy to have back Ryan Payne, a.k.a. Retro Game Brews.
Hashtag worth it. His hands are just so soft. I mean, for a guy who plays football, he lotions. He definitely lotions.
Oh, he lotions. Oh, I bet he did.
Yeah, good to be back. I'm actually recording my last episode ever in Georgia. So, c'est la vie to the south. I'll be moving up north here right after today. So
Daddy's back. Yay.
All right. Well, let's get this show started with our reviews, reactions, and requests. Bobson Dugnut says, the Tomb Raider ride, now known as Time Warp, at Canada's Wonderland was very different from what you described. It was the worst to ride in the summer. It was a lay-down ride on your stomach. The face rest things were always drenched in people's sweat and stunk. So if the ride itself wasn't enough to make you puke, that would... Nope.
Mommy, why is this moist?
I just ate too.
Well, that was your mistake.
Yeah, rookie mistake.
Terry Baca says, I just want to congratulate y'all on a fantastic run the past few weeks. The guest hosts have all been incredible, and I am loving the substitute teaching as well. Can't wait to hear Ryan back on the pod, but y'all have nailed it during his Eras tour.
And I couldn't agree more. Some of the best episodes I think we've done so far happened in the last week or so. Oh, not week, but last couple of weeks. And thank you guys for sticking it out without me. But more so, you guys just did a fantastic job. So I'm going to retire here and now. Because clearly I am not needed.
Okay, we will be taking applications for Ryan's replacement. Please send them to gamersweekpodcast@gmail.com. All right, and next up, Sassy Sony says, driving this morning, the Spawn says to me, can we listen to Gamers Week podcast instead of music? I like them. Sure, choose an episode. The Spawn scrolls and chooses episode 69. I don't know if we should feel proud or worried. Proud, definitely proud.
Yep, hashtag proud.
And now it's time for the... All right, listen up, Murtaugh. I know you've been on the VIPD for the last 25 years, but your last partner had a mental breakdown, so we're bringing in a rookie. No. Before you say anything, I heard this new guy has some great ideas for the poll. Think you should hear him out. You should be here any minute. His name is the Internet.
Raj, meet your new partner.
Hello, fellow carbon-based life form. I'm your new partner, the Internet. Word on the street is the VIP isn't what it used to be. I think we should start doing follow for follow on X to gain a bigger audience. You in?
Oh my God.
I feel like we need to start being overly niche with our questions, placate to the real gamers on social media, and stop kowtowing to the masses. That's what sheeple do.
I'm too old for this.
Okay, how about picking
Sheeple
answers
do.
for the questions that everyone likes? Sometimes you don't even pick the best answers, like this week. No Contra, no Golden Axe, worst answers ever.
I'm too old for this.
How about changing the nature of the show to talk about fan shipping? I hear that's really hot right now. Ooh, or
What?
hentai-based games. News is old and for old people who are just gonna die soon. This podcast needs to be about the future.
I'm too old for this.
Murtaugh, I think this partnership may not last. With you shooting down all my best ideas. What about the rest of the office? Are you guys picking up what I'm laying down?
I'm getting too old for this. I'm too old for I'm getting too old for this. I'm getting too old for this. I'm getting too old for it.
I'm getting too old for this sort of thing.
Look, I'm too old for this.
Get too
Thank
old for
you.
this shit.
Thank you for putting those Yoshi sounds in ahead of time.
Anytime.
I was like counting on my fingers like, no.
No.
There was part of me that wanted to keep him in, I gotta be honest.
You son of a...
You just added one more for yourself. I'm just throwing
Yeah,
that out
but it's
there.
okay when I do it because I know what I'm getting into.
Nice. All right. So as we do every week, every Monday on Twitter, we post our VIP, our very important poll. If you'd like to participate, follow us on Twitter at GamersWeekPC. The question for this week is, what is your favorite retro couch co-op game? Coming in third place was Guitar Hero with 20.6% of the vote. Coming in second place was Halo with 24.6% of the vote.
And crushing it this week was GoldenEye at 40.5% of the vote. But 14.3% of you said other, so let's take a look at some of the comments from the poll. At Slices of Pie said Quake 2 on the original PlayStation with a multi-tap. We played this game relentlessly, closely followed by Perfect Dark, and honorary mention to Super Bomberman 2 on the yes, good one. After Pub Pile-Ins to where I lived with about 12 people playing that, and the winner stays on. Kenneth DL said, I prefer beat-em-ups like TMNT and Streets of Rage. At Slumpenstein, great name, Wii Sports, gotta be up there, hard to choose one though. DD Willie said Contra 3, The Alien Wars. My roommate in college and I used to speed run it together nearly every weekend after classes and homework. And Lillian Freeman, 1985, said Halo is retro?
Ooh.
That's what I said when you posted the poll, and I was like, Halo? Oh, really? Retro? That means the Xbox is retro.
It is.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, it's not.
So was the PS2.
No, it's not. Shut up.
If the kids don't know what a PS2 is realistically, then it's fucking retro. Congratulations.
The octave of that no, that was like right up there. That was a cold finger.
All right, so taking a look at the question for this week, Donnie, what are you going with?
Some good answers on here. Some answers I wouldn't necessarily classify as co-op because I figure these are multiplayer. When you talk about GoldenEye or Halo or anything like that, or even Guitar Hero, that's not really co-op. It's multiplayer, head versus head, stuff like that. So when I think of co-op, my favorite ones are the beat-em-ups, Streets of Rage, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Contra, of course, even the original one for the NES. So I can't really focus on just one, but I'm going to say my favorite genre for couch co-ops are beat 'em ups.
Solid choice. Blue, what about you?
Yeah, I kind of had that same initial thought where co-op, it's even in the word cooperation, but it seemed like a lot of people answered it with just multiplayer games, which is completely fine. There's no rules here. We all say what we want. So
It's Thunderdome.
my first thought was Mario Kart on the Super Nintendo as a co-op game. So hear me out. When we would play, if my little sisters were in front, and then I would nail them with a shell, and then I would pass them and win, and there would be tears and crying and no fairs, blah, blah, blah. So eventually we decided on a truce, right? Where we could not shoot shells at each other. So what that usually then worked out to being is me being in first place and them being behind me, being the shell sponges, they're not being able to shoot me with their shells. It's a little shake and bake action.
Yeah,
it worked out great for me.
I wonder who came up with these rules.
Right.
I'm pretty sure, honestly, it was their idea. It's like, you can't shoot me anymore. It's like, okay, that's what you want, but I get the same.
Unintended consequences.
Yep. It was a valuable life lesson there. What about you, Ryan?
So I'm going to go with Halo on this one. Me and my brother used to play Halo all the time. When we got our Xbox, we actually bought the Halo edition of it. So it was like this translucent green one, came with like a Halo controller. Mm-hmm. Actually really badass. I loved that system. And we got it specifically to play Halo. And we spent hours going through all the different levels, like Nightmare and all that stuff. And we felt like we were really good at the game. And then we would go over a friend's house and play like multiplayer and get destroyed. So that was a very humbling experience as well. I will tell you my least favorite co-op game is Battletoads for the NES. That is the worst.
Because you can't actually win, right?
Well, for one,
it
is
glitch,
impossible.
Right?
You're right. It's impossible to win because at the one stage in which you're riding on rails, your second player just won't do it. But if you got a Game Genie, you can skip to the next level if you really want to. But two is it's got friendly fire. On. So you hit right. So you end up hitting your other toad that you're with. Not to mention by yourself, one of the hardest games of all time. Add extra difficulty to it by playing with a friend. That is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. But nonetheless, it is by far my least favorite. So you get both ends of the spectrum from me today.
Sorry, did you say you were taking both ends?
I don't think I said exactly that, but
That's what I heard.
willing. I am willing to learn.
It's what we heard.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to our patron shoutouts.
We couldn't do what we do without the help of our gorgeous patrons. Here are the generous folks supporting Gamers Week on Patreon. Davey PGH, the Red Ox BDX family, including Shannon and Luke, Zach Huge Thanks, Number 1 Blue Sick Voice Fan, John Baran, Sassy Sony, Evo Lust, Rai Rai's Secret Best Friend, Mega Retro Man, Game Metroid, Moradib, Michael Lakite, Emo Esque, Bill Tucker, The Real Retro Game Brews, Fruitcakes Pickled Pepper, Ducks with Thick Thighs, Wizard of Zardoz, Bobson Dugnut, Loudmouth, Retroblast Pat, Great Saiyaman 81, B&T Zillikai, The Mad Milkman, Seven Castle Forest, Crunchy Kong, Sheriff Snacks, Frank Grande, Love Retro BTW, Steven Sand, Ramboski, Terry Canary, Doongie Forever, Ducks in Disguise, Don't Make Me Pull Over This Car, Games with Coffee, Hybrid Divide, Matto1606, and You Fall Before Me. If you like what you hear today, and we really hope you do, please consider joining us on Patreon. Your support helps cover the cost of producing the show, as well as other cool stuff we'll be doing like prizes and giveaways. You'll also gain access to our weekly patron-only bonus cast called Gamers Week Uncut, Patrons with Benefits. Visit patreon.com/gamersweek, or follow the link in the show notes to learn more.
All right, let's move on to our headline segment. And our headlines are, of course, proudly sponsored by the Retro Game Club podcast. It's a fantastic, family-friendly retro gaming podcast. In each episode, Rob and Hugh pick 2 games to play and discuss, as well as news, interviews, and other topics. Right now, they want to know, what gaming magazines from the 1970s to the 1990s were your favorites? Send your answers to email@retrogameclub.net or follow the link in the show notes.
I got to be honest with you, I don't think gaming magazines were around in the 1970s. I think that became a thing in
Are you actualing the sponsor?
Actually.
I am. I did a Gaming History 101 on this, if you remember. And it would start off as guides, and they were in books. And eventually that turned over to magazines that were based more on PCs, right? And about PC culture, and that became a thing. And then eventually it turned into gaming magazines in like the mid 80s. And mostly it started in the UK. That was like the boom of gaming magazines. But yeah, I didn't mean to actually.
I do want to actually, Ryan.
Okay.
A double actually.
There was a game magazine called Playmeter. It was an American trade magazine focusing on the coin-op amusement arcade industry.
That was a trade magazine, though. Fair. You know what? We're calling it gaming magazines. If that's like okay. When I think of gaming magazines, I think of like what Nintendo Power and GamePro were doing. So yeah. Fair enough. I will take that. Actually. All right. First up from Destructoid, Yuzu developer will pay $2.4 million to settle with Nintendo, also shutting down 3DS emulator Citra. Just a week after news broke that Nintendo was suing Tropic Haze, the developer of the Switch emulator Yuzu, it appears the two have settled. As part of the settlement, Tropic Haze will pay Nintendo $2.4 million in damages and immediately cease operations of both Yuzu, the Switch emulator, and Citra, the 3DS emulator. The settlement details are quite cut and dry. Tropic Haze will pay Nintendo $2.4 million in damages and will halt all work on Yuzu and cease hosting Yuzu, distributing its code, or anything that promotes Yuzu and circumvents Nintendo's copyright protection. Tropic Haze developer Bunai also made a post on the official Yuzu Discord server about the two emulators coming to an end. We write to inform you that Yuzu and Yuzu's support of Citra are being discontinued effective immediately, reads the statement. Yuzu and its team have always been against piracy. We started the projects in good faith out of the passion for Nintendo and its consoles and games, and we're not intending to cause harm. But we see now that because our projects can circumvent Nintendo's technological protection measures and allow users to play games outside of authorized hardware, they have led to extensive piracy. In particular, we have deeply disappointed when users have used our software to leak game content prior to its release and ruin the experience for legitimate purchasers and fans. We have come to the decision that we cannot continue to allow this to occur. Piracy is never our intention, and we believe that piracy of video games and and on video game console should end. Effective today, we'll be pulling our code repositories offline, discontinuing our Patreon accounts and Discord servers, and soon shutting down our websites. We hope our actions will be a small step forward to ending piracy for all creators' works. Thank you for your years of support and for your understanding our decision.
This reads like one of those things where it's like blink twice if you need help.
I mean, we now see that our projects can circumvent Nintendo's technological protection.
This is brand new news.
Right. We didn't know this before.
And we were shocked and deeply disappointed that our software would be used for piracy. Who saw this coming?
And, we've been only accepting your Patreon donations every single month to keep this thing alive.
Exactly.
So that we can make money off of this whole thing. But,
Yeah, and when we saw the new flood of Patreon subscribers when Tears of the Kingdom was released, we just thought it was a coincidence. We didn't know those things were related. We're so disappointed in you. Yeah, this 100% was written by lawyers, and they said, we don't care what you believe. This is what you have to say to stay out of jail. You want to end up like Gary Bowser? No? Then you better say this.
Right.
Yep. Kiss the ring.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, 2.4 million in damages for Nintendo, that's not like a lot of money for Nintendo, for crying out loud. So I'm guessing that for all intents and purposes, they probably didn't gain 2.4 million, and the amount of money that Nintendo lost was much larger than 2.4 million because of, to your point, Tears of the Kingdom got played. What did it say? Something along the lines of like thousands or hundreds of thousands of downloads.
They said
this.
1 million, which we all were skeptical about, but whatever. Maybe they're rounding up.
So I'm going to say that this was certainly a slap on the wrist for them of what it could have been. 2.4 million just seems like it's such a low number for Nintendo to accept. But I think what it is a deterrent. If you can't afford to pay 2.4 million in damages, you're not going to do what these guys did, right?
And I wonder if that's what they received. That's the amount of money that they received in Patreon donations. Maybe they were smart enough. Maybe they foresaw that, let's tuck this money away in a safety net fund in case we get sued by Nintendo. Let's not go out and buy the Ferraris, buy the big mansions, buy the designer clothes and all that stuff. Let's just kind of put a pin in this. And hey, that's a good decision.
I think you're giving them too much credit.
Yeah, I think so too. I think Nintendo probably asked for a lot more, and because they settled, Yuzu was able to negotiate it down. Because it's like Gary Bowser has to pay Nintendo $14 million. He didn't make $14 million.
No.
They're just stringing him up and making an example of him. And that's really where the big issue of this settlement comes from, is how is it going to affect emulation moving forward?
Right. The one thing I will say is that they broke the cardinal rule when it comes to emulation, and they started emulating things that are still available for purchase. And
right there.
That's it. That's the biggest thing. And as far as emulation goes, I think you could make that argument in court moving forward. So if they decided to sue like NES 9X or something like that, they could just say, well, you haven't been selling most of these games. The only difference being the ones that you can purchase on the Nintendo Online. Right. And the other piece to this is they were making money off it, not like directly, right? It was Patreon subscriptions. We all know better. Didn't work. But I also will say, if you're making an emulator to pirate games for the Nintendo and 3DS, you definitely bought a Lambo. You definitely hit up Vegas. You spent the money.
Well, you should, because otherwise they're going to take it from you.
Right. So live it up.
Right.
Live it
Drive
up.
the Lambo while you can. Eventually they'll come repossess it. You're back where you started. MBD.
They should have done is put it all in crypto under like a ghost account or something.
There you go. Yep.
Maybe that's why the Bitcoin has gone up so much in price lately.
Because all the money that they...
Just that Nintendo emulator money.
Yeah. Now, I'm with you, Ryan. I agree that the fact that, the Switch is still in production, the Switch is still being sold in stores, and so are all the games. So shame on them for creating an emulator for an existing console. The 3DS, however, I'm on their side because the 3DS is no longer being made. That handheld is gone.
And the eShop is shut down.
Right.
The eShop is shut down, just as you said. The games are not being sold in stores. I think they're still selling games. Actually, no, they're not even doing that on the Switch. They don't have a 3DS or platform on the Switch like they do with the Super Nintendo, the Sega Genesis, and the NES. So all those games now are essentially, if you didn't buy them, you're screwed. So in this case, I'm with Yuzu for being able to go and get a 3DS emulator if I wanted to play those games. But the Switch, not so much.
I think it's fair. The one problem that you run into, I think, though, is that because it's just so... I mean, can you still go and buy 3DS games in a store right now?
Not unless it's like GameStop or something.
Oh.
I mean, you never know. Was it the brand new Wii U?
That's right.
So you never know. Yeah, you never know what shops have like stuck in the boxes in the back room.
Man, I just never thought I'd be in an era where like a Nintendo handheld wasn't selling games. That's so strange to me.
Unless you go the Switch is a handheld.
A handheld.
Because you have the Switch Lite, which is a handheld.
And I don't know if Nintendo's going to go back to having its own singular handheld system with the Switch and the next iteration of the Switch coming out.
They don't have to.
No, not at all.
As far as they're concerned, they've solved that problem of having to sell two different pieces of hardware.
We'll see.
Agreed.
They also like money.
It is true. They do like money.
So do I.
Speaking of which, we have any aspirations of making like a PlayStation or Xbox emulator? Oh, I only ask because we've already got a Patreon.
Do you know anybody that can code?
That's what I'm saying is, if we just make some friends somewhere.
I hear that Cobalt is the best.
Cobalt is the best.
Next up from GameSpot, Rooster Teeth shutting down after 2 decades, is looking to sell off Red vs. Blue. Rooster Teeth, the entertainment company behind the popular Halo parody Red vs. Blue and magical girl action series Ruby, is shutting down after 21 years. The news was announced at an all-hands meeting on March 6 alongside a staff-wide memo from Rooster Teeth general manager Jordan Levin, according to Variety. The memo states that the company's closure came as a result of challenges facing digital media resulting from fundamental shifts in consumer behavior and monetization across platforms, advertising, and patronage. Warner Bros. Discovery is in talks to sell off some of Rooster Teeth's most popular intellectual property, including Red vs. Blue. The show popularized Machinima,
yes, you had it right the first time, but you said it with a funny accent. Machinima.
The show popularized Machinima with its use of the Halo game series to tell its story and put Rooster Teeth on the map in 2003. In more recent years, Rooster Teeth has become more associated with its anime-inspired original show Ruby, which has run for 9 seasons and spawned multiple spin-offs and video games. More than 150 full-time employees will be laid off following Rooster Teeth's closure, which will also affect various contractors and content creators who partner with the company. According to Variety, Rooster Teeth has operated at a loss for the past decade, and its annual fan convention, RTX, which was recently canceled in 2024 prior to news of the company's shutdown, has never been profitable. In 2022, the company came under fire following allegations from a former employee of low pay and harassment. Rooster Teeth, in a statement, said it was disheartened to hear of anyone who has experienced pain while working at the company, and that it would work to address and investigate past conduct as it moved forward. Though not intentional, it's only appropriate that our last season of Red vs. Blue coincides with us navigating this closure together, Levin said in the staff-wide memo. Our legacy is not just a collection of content, but a history of pixels burned into our screens, minds, and hearts. Rooster Teeth has made an indelible mark on the media industry, and we should be so proud of the countless ways we pioneered a business connecting creators and content with a dedicated company. So forget all the idea of harassment and low pay, but focus on the closure. We're going to travel together. Jesus.
Burn!
Right?
I will say, though, I loved Red versus Blue back in the day. Now, Machinima wasn't invented, of course, by Rooster Teeth. That was something that I think really first came to light with like the Quake games. I think they even made like a Quake movie back in the day, back in the mid to late 90s. But it was just something about the way that they were able to add funny storytelling using an Xbox, essentially, as a device, right? So they were able to not only create these just funny dialogues to go along with it, which is what drew me in the first place, but there were a lot of things that they were doing that were in game that allowed them to also do storytelling. So for example, one instance where they're supposedly getting bombed by a plane that's over top, all they did was just record grenades exploding in succession going towards them. And it was such a fun and unique way to watch things. And the characters were extremely memorable. You know, you had like Church and Caboose and Sarge, who, you know, I still say every once in a while, grenadine straight from the can, delicious. So there is a part of me that's like, you know, a little bit sad that the company who made that, and obviously how it is nowadays is a lot different, but there's still that nostalgia feeling for Rooster Teeth. So to see that they're kind of going away is, you know, a little bit pour one out kind of moment, if you will. But I absolutely fell in love with Red versus Blue. I go back and watch it every once in a while just because it's extremely entertaining. And if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it.
I have not seen it.
The interesting part is that it starts off with really short episodes. They're like 6 or 7 minutes long. And then it gets to the point where they're like hour or more long. But they're really funny. And it's slapstick humor in a way, right? It's satirical. It's ironic. And like, for example, there's a joke in there where two guys are hiding behind a boulder and the guy's on the machine gun on the Warthog. And he says to him, "Oh man, we'll just hide here until that runs out of bullets." Which the joke is, in Halo, it never runs out of bullets.
But Rooster Teeth back in the day, it was like what the cool kids knew about.
Right.
And you could make a joke from Red versus Blue. If they got it, then they were cool. And if not, you're like, okay, well, whatever.
Pleb. But I'm shocked that they've been able to keep this going for so long when they've been operating at a loss for that long.
Right.
And I got to be honest, when was the last time Halo was relevant?
It's been a while. The TV show probably helped.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. And that's you can't deny that. But the last game that came out, I think, was a poor attempt at a resurrection for Halo. And I tried playing it, and the TTK on that thing was just god awful, that I was like, you know what? Nope, can't do this. I'm going back to Warzone. So in my honest opinion, Halo hasn't been really relevant for a while as a game series. So it's only, I guess, right that they kill it.
I'll give you that. In fact, I got to be honest with you. When I read the article saying that it was going away, I had one of those, like, you know, when a celebrity does something and that they're kind of in the older section of their life, and you go, that person's still alive? I thought that was
The Sonic meme. How are you still alive? All right, next up from Games Radar, Alan Wake 2 composer violated one piano with adult toys to create the horror game's nightmarish soundscape.
What?
Alan Wake 2 is a wild ride in nearly every sense of the word, and to match the game's oddball energy, composer Petri Alanko used some unconventional toys to bring the nightmarish soundtrack to life. Developer Remedy Entertainment seemingly pulled out all the stops for its long-awaited horror sequel, Alan Wake 2. There are two protagonists, a lavish musical number, heavy nods to the studio's 2-decade history. So Alanko had to keep pace with the studio via unusual means. By now, Remedy knows I won't leave a stone unturned in order to find something extraordinary, says Alanko in an insightful interview with NME. I recorded a rusty old cattle fence, burned 2 pianos, violated 1 piano with adult toys, and triggered a fire alarm, then dropped a piano from a forklift onto a concrete floor. Alanko says that the last accident happened by mistake, but his unconventional methods didn't harm the game's moody soundtrack. What matters is, does the music speak to you? Does it move you? Everything else is f***ing pointless nagging, he says. A great score is a great score. Defiling countless pianos sounds like a pretty easy way to sink development costs, but Alan Wake 2 recently became the studio's fastest-selling game ever, so no harm done. Remedy is now working on 2 expansions for Alan Wake 2, and though they won't directly cross over with Control, they will tease what's next in the Remedy-connected universe.
Dear Games Radar, you missed on this one, I think. You could have said pulling out all the beads rather than pulling out all the stops.
You got to rip start it, Carl.
Man, speaking from experience.
So this guy's a genius because Alan Wake 2 has been so successful. But what if Alan Wake 2 was not? What if it was just like a mid game or even a low tier game? Now this guy's a fucking nut because he's using 6 toys on a piano. But because the game's a hit, he's a genius.
What is that? Is that line is like the line between insanity and genius is, razor thin, right? In this particular instance, it's sales numbers, I guess. But I want to know which adult toys. We didn't really get into that.
Yeah, I was going to say, because we're all adults here, and I know that our minds all went somewhere. They all at least picked one option and thought about it deeply, about how it would work and what kind of sound you might get.
Just go into the adult shop and they're like, "What are you looking for?" I'm just browsing for right now. Do you have anything that would fit inside of a piano? And that's not the weirdest question they had that day.
Wow, that loose, huh? I can just imagine him setting 2 vibrators on either end of the piano, turning them on and having them just kind of race towards the middle.
Yeah, it's something more like holding the dildos in his hands and then playing chopsticks.
Bonk, 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 bonk. Hands get sweaty, they bounce off, hit you in the eye. Oh!
That's always a risk.
It gets increasingly more difficult the bigger the dildo is. If it's a 12-inch long one, then you're like, because it takes longer to hit the keys.
He used the piano and big, is what he for the really, really big one.
Right. He went on Adam and Eve and just ordered one of everything.
I want to work at whatever development house made this. And Remedy, that's right. That sounds like a fun place to work. Where nobody questioned that from a budget perspective. What is this receipt in petty cash for?
All right, let's move on to our top 3 new releases.
First up is Unicorn Overlord. PS5, Xbox X and S, PS4, and Switch. Unicorn Overlord combines the timeless tactical RPG genre with the overworld exploration, innovative battle system from a unique epic fantasy experience in the iconic Vanillaware style. Traverse a vibrant world, assemble units, and direct them into exquisitely animated battles. Cultivate a grand army with over 60 unique characters from humans and elves to the massive beasts and heavenly angels. Within each battle stage, both sides will fight to take on each other's command posts in thrilling real-time combat. Next up is Snufkin, Melody in Moomin Valley. This sounds like a random name generator was used for this.
Along with some NyQuil.
All right. Coming out on Switch and PC, a series of hideous parks have cropped up in Moomin Valley, disrupting the landscape and its harmonious nature. As Snufkin, you will distract police officers, pull out signs, and knock over misplaced statues as you vigorously try to restore nature and the inhabitants' home while putting an end to the insidious park keeper's plan. Experience narrative gameplay and a myriad of charming stories and quests involving the beloved characters inspired by Tove Janison's work in the musical adventure game. And last up, WWE 2K24. PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X and S, PS1, Xbox One, and PC. Experience a gripping retelling of WrestleMania's greatest moments in 2K showcase of the Immortals in WWE 2K24, where you can relive a collection of some of the most unforgettable career-defining matches. WWE 2K24 boasts a star-studded roster featuring WWE legends like Stone Cold Steve Austin, Undertaker, Andre the Giant, alongside with the current WWE superstars like the American Nightmare, Cody Rhodes, John Cena, Rhea Ripley, and Roman Reigns, whose larger-in-life entrances and signature moves are heightened by ultra-realistic graphics. So taking a look at the 3 choices for the week, Donnie, what are you in for?
I haven't been a wrestling person in quite some time. The last wrestling game that I think I really invested time in was WCW versus NWO Revenge, WWF No Mercy, and WWF WrestleMania for the N64. That being said, because of all the legends that you can play, because of all the people that I see on here, the roster is just insane. And that kind of draws me into this game. Not to mention the fact that you can play in some of the most highlighted matches from WCW and WWE, like SummerSlam and WrestleMania and Bash at the Beach and whatnot. The other two games, Unicorn Overlord, Snufkin Melody of Moomy Valley, just the way they look and their content does not suit me at all. So I'm automatically passing on these. But because I'd like what I see from WWE 2K24, if this game were to come out and kind of go the way of like $19 or something like that, absolutely. I think I could see myself picking it up.
Nice. Blue, what about you?
Well, you know how much I love wrestling, so I'm just going to skip right past WWE 2K24.
What?
I know. Shocker. Snufkin Melody of Moomin Valley. I know the Moomin characters just from like the memes, but apparently it's a Finnish cartoon and comic series from like the 1940s through the 1990s. So I bet there's some interesting culture there. The whole like Fern Gully vibe of it kind of didn't do a lot for me. So I think it's cute, but I'm probably not going to run out and grab it. Unicorn Overlord is the one that I would be most interested in. The thing is that I'm not a hugest tactical RPG fan, but sometimes I like them. So of these three, that's the one I would go for.
Nice.
Awesome. Ryan, what are you picking up this week?
So Snufkin Melody of Moomin Valley, that did not grab me whatsoever. It
didn't grab you by the haunches and hump you into submission?
No, it didn't.
No? Okay.
WWE 2K4. I'm in the same boat as you, Donnie. I think maybe WWF or WWE Attitude was the last one I really played any as far as a wrestling game is concerned. And I'm going to say something probably controversial. I'm not a huge fan of Vince McMahon. I know he recently stepped down, but I also know that he's also going to make a crap ton of money off of this anyway. So probably won't be picking that up. And even if it is the proverbial $19.99. So but that's my sole opinion. That is not the opinion of everybody on this show. So feel free to at me. Unicorn Overlord sounds like something that would be right up my alley. I love tactical RPGs. Visually, yes, it looks impressive, but from a gameplay perspective, it just seems a little generic from a tactical RPG standpoint. I'd have to see a lot more of the gameplay to see if it really stands out from every other tactical RPG that's out there. So, that's where I'm a little skeptical, but, push comes to shove, I think probably Unicorn Overlord would be the game that I would go for this week.
All right, let's move on to our main topic.
From Metro, Reader's Future. The video game crash has already begun and few companies will survive. Reading the game news lately seems so surreal. Everything is bad news. But not normal, trivial things like the Switch 2 being delayed, but super serious stuff, with over 6,000 game developers having lost their jobs already this year. Some of this seems to be down to typical corporate callousness, as sort of performative indifference to people's livelihoods to impress investors and higher-ups. Beyond that, though, it's clear that there is a deep problem with the way games are made and sold nowadays. Why everyone suddenly only realized this halfway through the generation, and all at exactly the same time, I don't know. It's like some evil bat signal has gone out that has finally made publishers realize that a budget of $300+ million, Spider-Man 2, for a video game that takes 5 years to make is not a sustainable concept. And what has been the response of Microsoft, Sony, EA, and all the rest? A calm, considered approach that is clearly part of a long-term plan they've been working on for years? No, of course not. It's been blind panic. The bosses of games companies may be paid more money than God, but they seem to have the business acumen of an innumerate badger. Many people have already started making comparisons to the video games crash of 1983, when the US market imploded because of too many cheaply made, poor quality games. Many people have also pointed out that this time around we are in the opposite position. Too few highly expensive, high quality games. I've also seen a lot of people scoffing at the end idea of a market crash and insisting it could never happen again, but to be honest, I think they're just saying what they hope is true. Microsoft and Sony has made it very clear that the current way of doing things cannot continue and that they have to find alternate ways to do business. They've kept everything intentionally vague, because nobody wants to say, we're giving up making those games you love and are just going to do live service trash from now on. But that's clearly what they're thinking. They'll probably still put out a few proper games, but I'm afraid the golden age of modern gaming is already over and that we're already living in the early days of the crash right now.
A quick look at the schedules shows there's almost nothing major coming out this year, and Sony has specifically said they haven't got anything out in the next 12 months. There's also no evidence or leaks to suggest they have anything other than Wolverine next year. Xbox has a lot more games on the way, but last summer's showcase seems a lifetime ago now, back when Starfield still looked good, and before that embarrassing Direct last month where they announced their games were starting to go multi-format and that they had to find other ways to contribute to their growth. As usual, they were purposefully vague as to what this meant, but this week, EA said and acted the same way, except making it clearer that what they're going to do is double down on live service games and stop making single-player games as soon as their current projects are complete. That may be everyone's plan, but I'm not sure it's going to work. EA has been trying to replicate the live service success of their sports games for a decade or more now, and they've never got it to work. All they've done is run Battlefield into the ground and come up with a lot of dead ends. Ubisoft has been even worse, absolutely obsessed with live service games for years, and yet not a one of them has been a hit, unless you count Rainbow Six Siege, which was around before this current fad ever began. Sony has announced 12 games from their internal teams, all due out by 2026, and not shown gameplay of a single one yet, let alone released any of them. What Microsoft is planning in this area is a mystery, but it's hard to imagine they've figured it all out without ever having any real experience with the concept.
We got publishers giving up on what has been their bread and butter for decades and instead focusing on something most of them have never got right, which is known to have very low success rate in terms of being a mega hit. And at the same time, even if they do want to make a normal single player game, they are now more expensive and more time consuming than they've ever been. That's a recipe for disaster and a clear sign that we're already in a crash. Making a profitable video game has been rendered almost impossible in the space of just a few years, and nobody seems to know what to do about it. Microsoft will probably be okay because they're so rich and own a big mobile company, but all the money that hasn't translated into a tangible success beyond just being Activision with a different name. The others, though, I worry they're not going to make it. Sony is going to end up with at least 2 dead years in a row. Ubisoft hasn't had a big hit in ages, and EA just seems to be dooming itself to be sports sim publisher and nothing more. Like cockroaches after a nuclear war, mobile gaming and other ultra-casual offering will survive the crash easily, but there are no guarantees about anything else. These big publishers and others employ many thousands of people, and if someone like Ubisoft goes under, that means disaster for all of them. If it isn't already, a job in gaming is soon to be seen as far too risky and that going to create its own obvious problems. The situation couldn't be worse, and I couldn't have less faith that publishers will be able to fix any of this. The reader features do not necessarily represent the views of Game Central or Metro.
You should say that last part really fast, like the disclaimer on a drug commercial.
The reader's features do not necessarily represent the views of Game Central or Metro.
So what do you guys think? Are we in a video game crash?
I think this is an exaggeration. When I think of video game crash, I think 1983, where the entire market dropped out, that gaming was seen as a fad and no longer viable, and that it was just something that we were all going to move on from. That didn't happen, thankfully, because of other factors, and gaming found its foothold again. But for a good 6 months to a year, that was the landscape that existed. Games that they were charging $49.99 for were $1 in a bin somewhere. Basically,
yeah, it was longer than that.
Well, I'll say that's when PC gaming started to kind of pick up a little bit. So that padded some of the problems. But it wasn't until Nintendo made its way to North America did North America see the rebound of it. Japan had no video game crash of 1983. In Europe, It was so-so. But to not say, of course, just being North American centric, nowadays we are a global gaming community, and that would mean that everything falls out. So that's one thing I do have a problem with using the term video game crash. Do I think that there's a crisis? I do. I think it's becoming to the point in which it's getting too big for its own good. And in that sense, it's becoming more and more difficult and more expensive to create games. We've been talking about this for years as a problem when it comes to the gaming industry. But I don't think that that's going to lead to what this person is suggesting, and that we're going to see the likes of Sony disappear out of the gaming industry completely, and that Microsoft is just going to make mobile games from here on out. I think it's more likely that it's going to evolve into something where they're going to figure out a way to potentially cut costs. We've talked about things like the dongle.
Dongle.
Thank you. We've talked about the fact that, games as a service are becoming more and more popular. Not exactly our favorite things to see. And we've talked about the concept of, streaming games and having those streaming services available. I think that's more likely what the gaming industry is going to eventually evolve into, but I don't think it's going to go away. And that's, I think, what this person is trying to ring the alarm bell to say, that he or she thinks that this passion that we have, this hobby that we enjoy so much, is going to find its way to the point in which it's just not going to exist, or it's going to exist that it's just mobile. That's an overreaction.
I would tend to agree with you in that regard. I definitely think we are at a crisis. We are not going to see video games go away anytime soon, especially with the amount of money, the amount of revenue that they bring in. But I will say that the landscape is going to change drastically. We already see AI popping in with how games are developed, with voice acting, with visual effects, with visual aesthetics. You have images that can be created by AI. Now, I believe, and somebody can quote me or correct me if I'm wrong, but they have the ability to create levels, to create effects and gameplay based on AI. So all of this money that they've spent on creating these blockbuster video games, these $300 million, $500 million to create a single video game, that's going to be the way of the past, because you don't need that many people focusing on the video game development itself, when you can just pop it into the AI saying, okay, the setting is post-apocalyptic yada, yada, yada with these features, and boom, there's your environment. Okay, I've got my protagonist. Here's my image of my protagonist that I've created a 3D model. Make him run, make him jump, make him shoot. Bam, 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 done. Here you go. And it's that easy. With a push of a button, a computer by itself can create the entire game, and all you have to do is market it.
I think that the crucial difference between the crash before of 1983 and now is that you're right, Ryan, the public became disinterested in gaming, whereas now that's completely not the case. There are more people who identify themselves as gamers, or even don't, but still play games, than there has ever been before. It's insane, the number of people who now engage in this, not as a fringe hobby, not as just a niche thing that the nerds are into, but it's a normal thing. It's a normal form of entertainment, right up there with TV and movies and anything else. So you guys are right, this is not going to go away, but games as we know them might change if the big established publishers all topple. What is gaming going to look like? Or if they all decide that, the games that we love, they're just not worth it anymore. Although the article specifically calls out Spider-Man 2, which Insomniac said had that $300+ million budget, which sounds crazy, but according to Statista, it sold 10 million units. So you figure that by $60, $70 a pop, and that paid off for them. Does it pay off for every game? No, it certainly doesn't. You have to have enormous success to make back that kind of money. So in the coming years, I really do think that we're going to start to see a drastic change in the type of games we get. Of course, we've talked before about indie games will always be there to fill that demand. I think maybe AA games will start to be more and more of a thing now, besides just straight indies. But as far as the big tentpole AAA games that everybody kind of hangs their release calendar around and tend to dominate stuff like the Game Awards and that kind of stuff, the days may be numbered unless they can find a way, like you said, Donnie, perhaps turn to AI and stuff to fill those voids. But I'm really not convinced that AI is going to be able to do that in a way that people are going to accept.
At least for now. I think AI is so new and that it's so green, if you will, that it just doesn't have the technological capabilities to do that. But give it 10 years and you won't know the difference. And that's a little scary, to say the least. But I would agree that AI, as we use it today, is just not up to snuff for that. But it does cut costs in small ways, and those small things add up long term. So it's certainly, at this point, it's a tool. It's not the whole kit and caboodle, if you will. Saying that, though, for years, they've tried to make back that money in some capacity or another. EA is probably the one that's the most notorious for this, for having all of their games being essentially either filled with loot boxes or making it pay to win style stuff.
They're not loot boxes, they're surprise mechanics. We've talked about
I'm sorry.
this.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yes. But the thing is, they have to figure out a way to make money on this, because at the end of the day, it is a business for them, and they're going to go the way money takes them.
And I will give them a little bit of credit in that the formula for what constitutes a successful game seems to continually change. You can't get away with what you did 10 years ago, because people are like, oh, we've already played this. It's just like so-and-so. Like you think about Forspoken, the Square Enix game that came out. On the surface, there's nothing wrong with it. I played the demo. It was fine. But the overall feeling I had of it was like, I feel like I've played this already. So why do I need to play it again? So I think having to not only be able to make the kind of games that can sell these kind of units, but to always come up with new tricks, a new approach, a new technique. How are you going to make this new and innovative so it's not just the same old, same old? That's a very difficult job. And the way that AAA games are they don't seem to be performing the way they did and during what you might call like the golden age of AAA games, where every new game was just like, oh my God, it's amazing, it's groundbreaking. And now the market is just really so jaded.
I got to be honest, if I see a game like Crusader of Senti come out and I've already played A Link to the Past, I'm not going to go pick up Crusader of Senti. It looks exactly like the game I've already played. I already know the environment. I already know the gameplay. Why do I want to go out and spend my hard-earned money on a game that's just a clone or a copy?
Right.
So you're telling me that you weren't like a huge fan of Time Killers on the Sega Genesis when that came out?
I was not.
You didn't think to yourself like, wow, this is, a terrible ripoff of Mortal Kombat?
Yeah. No, and that's a fine line, okay? You have something that was innovative as Mortal Kombat, and everybody wanted to capitalize on the whole blood and gore thing because it hadn't been done before.
Right.
So in that kind of regard, I can understand it. You can kind of see, you can play around with things and see what's going to work and what's not. But for the most part, right now, there's just everything's already been done, right? To me, it seems like everything has already been done. So what the hell can we do now?
And that's one of the things with AI that becomes a pitfall, right? Because the AI utilizes everything that's already been done to make new things. Nothing innovative, truly innovative comes out of it. But I think there's always going to be room for some innovation. It's just the question is what you're trying to push out there, is it risky? And that's, I think, is the problem that we're running into. It's not. Can
you have innovation without risk?
Well, and that's the problem, right? So right now it's coming to a head where if you are trying to be innovative, you're taking a risk to do so. If you just want to copy what everyone else has done, more than likely you will have more guaranteed success, but you probably won't be a big master hit either, right? So which one, if you're looking at it from a balance sheet perspective, are you going to go with? You're not going to go with the innovative game where you're going to potentially lose hundreds of millions of dollars to develop this thing. You're going to go with the thing that some people will sign up for, and they're going to say, oh, this is good, I enjoyed it, and play it for 6 months and never touch it again, but at least you got their money in the front. Right.
Like you said, you can take a risk on a game and lose hundreds of millions of dollars, or you can put out a formula game and only lose a half of the hundreds of millions of dollars, because still people don't like it either way.
Right.
Yeah.
Both of those choices are not the answer.
They want the ones that are going to make a lot of money. They want the Titanics. They want the Avatars.
We know what happened to the Titanic.
The movie, not the actual ship. So, yeah, I think it's going to come to a head where they've got to make some tough decisions. But I just don't see it being something where video games go away in any capacity.
It's not a crash, but it could be a revolution. It just depends on how they respond.
Exactly. I like that. Viva la revolution!
All right, before we move on, let's take a quick break to talk about our sponsor. This segment is proudly sponsored by A Gamer Looks at 40 podcast. The show explores the history of video games through the stories and experiences of the people who lived it. The podcast is officially back from hiatus and launching its multi-month deep dive into the world of Final Fantasy. On this week's episode, Bill and guests share personal stories about growing up with the Final Fantasy franchise. So this week's question is, which game franchise do you most closely associate with your childhood? Let Bill know your answer by sending him a tweet at A Gamer Looks at 40 on Twitter.
I'm going to go with Mega Man on this one. Mega Man on the NES, Mega Man on Super Nintendo. That was such a huge staple in my house growing up. And you know what? That was a formula that worked.
For a while.
I absolutely love Mega Man. It's simplistic, but it's difficult. The music in it is fantastic. And it gives you exactly what you're looking for, just that feeling of accomplishment and satisfaction. So definitely Mega Man.
Very nice. For me, I'm going to have to say the Donkey Kong series. Enamored with it from an early age, from seeing it in the arcades and laundromats. Whenever my mom would go up to do the laundry, I'd have to sit there for however long it took to do laundry, and she'd just give me a whole bunch of quarters so I could put it into Donkey Kong Jr., or Donkey Kong 3. I absolutely love that series, still love it to this day, and I am trying to get either a Donkey Kong or a Donkey Kong Jr. arcade cabinet to add to my house. So that's how much love I have for that series.
You're lucky, though. Your laundromat had an arcade. When I was in college using the laundromat, all I could do was watch soap operas that were in Vietnamese.
Bet you learned a lot, though.
I did. And in fact, the woman who ran it used to explain to me what was happening in between commercials.
Very nice.
See, I got to say Mario. Mario is the first time that I remember falling in love with games. The first games that I played were on Atari, but I was very young and they weren't that fun to me. And then in the late 80s, our neighbors got an NES. And I went over to their house and played some Mario and played some Duck Hunt. And I was like, what is this? And ever since then, I have loved games. And Mario has just kind of been that constant presence throughout my life as a gamer. So 100%, I'm going to say Mario.
All right, fellow kids, wrestle that PlayStation controller away from your girlfriend, splash on some cool water cologne, call in that order for Little Caesars Pizza where you get 2 pizzas for 1, and make sure you don't have any late fees on your Blockbuster membership, because where we're going, you'll wish you didn't. This is the Retro Rewind for March 1996.
Thank you for assuming in 1996 I had a girlfriend. Appreciate that.
I did. You didn't?
I was 11.
Some of the top Billboard songs and their artists for this month was Celine Dion, Because You Loved Me, the Tony Rich Project, Nobody Knows this song.
Yeah, I was like, what?
Brandy, Sitting Up in My Room, I know that song. Mary J. Blige, Not Gon' Cry. Mariah Carey and Boyz II Men, One Sweet Day. R. Kelly, Keep It on the Down Low. He wants you to keep everything on the down low, if you know what I mean. Alanis Morissette with Ironic. Everything But the Girl, Missing. Love that song, and I absolutely love that group. Follow You Down by Gin Blossoms. And Joan Osborne, One of Us. What if God was one?
That Alanis Morissette CD, that took my high school by storm.
Jagged Little Pill. Yep.
Yep.
That is my wife has her Pandora set to Alanis Morissette radio.
The anger, the rage.
It's the Riot Girl era. What do you want?
Yeah, Riot Girl, Lilith Fair, all that stuff.
Yep.
Back in the
KD
90s.
Lang.
Yep.
That was good stuff.
Melissa Etheridge. But I'm the only one.
Come in my nostrils.
What? Hot at the theaters this month was The Birdcage, Up Close and Personal, Executive Decision, Down Periscope, Homeward Bound 2, Lost in San Francisco.
Oh my God.
Broken Arrow, Rumble in the Bronx.
Rumble in the Bronx. Good movie.
Good Jackie Chan.
Yeah.
I was about to say, what a shitty month.
Exactly. Yeah. It gets better. It gets better. Happy Gilmore. Classic. Love it. Mr. Holland's Opus, not to be confused with the adult version of Mr. Holland's Anus.
Guess which one I've watched more.
Which one have you worn out the VCR on? And last, but certainly not least, and probably at the top of this list, Muppet Treasure Island.
Oh, I love Muppet Treasure Island.
Classic.
Tim Curry is so good in that movie. My sisters and I quote it all the time.
Tim Curry, if you're listening, we absolutely love you at the Gamers Week podcast.
Have you seen that? The thing that goes around online where it's like Michael Caine and Tim Curry were the best in their respective Muppet movie roles because Michael Caine treated the Muppets like fellow actors and Tim Curry treated himself like a fellow Muppet. I was like, it's so true.
Well played. In the news this month, a new toll-free 888 area code was introduced in the United States. Fargo, directed and written by Joel and Ethan Coen, starring Frances McDormand, William H. Macy, and Steve Buscemi, was released in the U.S. Mike Tyson TKOs Frank Bruno in the third round to gain the heavyweight title. Cleveland Browns chose a new name for their relocated team, the Baltimore Ravens.
Some Browns fans just like, thank you for bringing that up. It's like you've been like, and Scott Norwood kicks it wide right.
And then the Ravens ended up going to win a Super Bowl championship in 2001. That was like a stake to the heart.
Man, you were just turning that knife, just turning it.
I understood that reference.
And in WrestleMania 12, at the Arrowhead Pond in Anaheim, California, Shawn Michaels, the Heartbreak Kid, beats Bret Hart for the WWF Heavyweight title. Hot at the arcades this month. It's a very short list. It was Killer Instinct 2. Now, do you guys remember Killer Instinct?
Of course.
Yeah.
When it came out, how different it was, but how similar it was to Street Fighter. They tried to mishmash Street Fighter with Mortal Kombat.
Right.
And I got to tell you, this was the first time whenever Killer Instinct came out, I could not get combos down to save my life. I loved Mortal Kombat 1. I loved Mortal Kombat 2. I loved being able to just, maybe there were a couple combos that you could do, but nothing strenuous. This was like, a 56 hit combo. What? Are you kidding me?
Ultra
combo breaker. Like, you're sitting there trying your best to try and break this guy's combo, and he's just like slap, 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 repeating the same damn move over and over, and you finally break that shit. Oh my God, it's like finally I can rest. From the readers this month, Dear EGM, having been an EGM subscriber and an avid video game player almost all of my life, I have a ringside seat at War of the Systems. First it was Nintendo and Sega, but now with the Ultra 64 delayed, we have focused on the battle between Sega and Sony. Every month, someone in some magazine has to voice their opinion on which system kills the other one and how one outsells the other one. No matter how many letters you guys answer with, well, we here at EGM have an open mind and like both systems, people still write to you saying how they love this and that. Well, here's one for you. I own a PlayStation and have frequently engaged in Saturn bashing over the last few months. Judging by Sega's first generation games, I had a right to. But now they have such titles as Sega Rally and the arcade-perfect Virtual Cop on the market. It's becoming apparent that it's not a cheap piece of junk that many Sony-crazed fans portray it as. I work for a corporation that sells PC and console software, and often have the chance to play these new Sega titles. The comparison basically comes down to this. Sega's and Sony's machines are pretty much equal. Do I dare say it? Yes. Even though the Saturn can move more polygons and is slightly more powerful, the difficulty in developing games that utilize that power has brought it to equal ground with Sony. Besides, the true test of a system is its games. I've heard that a million times. However, it is true. If you like Sega's arcade games and 2D side-scrollers, go buy a Saturn. If you enjoy Namco games and like everything to be 3D, buy a PlayStation. Stop the endless comparisons, please. Some people like one thing, while others prefer another. You say tomato, I say potato. Buy what you like and stop cluttering up the fine pages of EGM with Sega sucks and Sony sucks. That's about all I have to say, so I'm going to go play my PlayStation. Tony Pagano via AOL.
Via AOL. And Tony, after this one, you've got hate mail.
Notice he doesn't leave his AOL address. And I got to say, you're not alone. This is something that's still today with the PS5 and the Xbox Series X and whatnot. We're still seeing this. So people are going to say this console does it better than this console. This console has better games than this console. With today, I actually don't think that one is true. All the consoles have equally great games that you can play. So there really is no one that beats the other in terms of the content that they have.
And really with the Saturn back in the day too, it was kind of hamstrung with the fact that a vast majority of the really good games were only available overseas if you were a North American owner of the Sega Saturn. Nowadays, because you can buy that little like insert that you can put in the back of your Saturn that will basically take off the region lock, it opens up the world of what Saturn could have been if they had released a lot more games in North America. I mean, really, we might be still talking about Sega. I know that hurts, Donnie. I know that hurts.
No, because Sega would have had to stop making stupid decisions. They were never going to do that.
That wasn't going to happen.
No. Let's be realistic.
In video game news, chart-topping sales and new Ultra 64 titles for Nintendo. Lots to brag about in the Nintendo camp this month. As expected, its latest SNES offering, Donkey Kong Country 2, quickly shot to the top of the December sales charts. Demand was so strong for DKC2 over the holidays that many stores sold out their copies immediately, and Toys R Us, the nation's leading toy retailing chain, had to implement a special reservation policy in order to satisfy cart-hungry SNES owners who couldn't get their hands on the game in time for Christmas. For Nintendo's DKC2 sales performance was reminiscent of last year's sales record set by Donkey Kong Country. DKC quickly established itself as one of the fastest-selling games of all time, selling more than 4 million copies in its first 5 months of release. While not quite as popular as its predecessor, DKC 2 is still on track to be the biggest-selling game released in 1995. Looking to the future, Nintendo announced that 3 more games are in development for the Ultra 64. Pilot Wing 64 from Paradigm Simulation is the sequel to the multi-million-selling SNES hit Pilot Wings. No release date has been specified. Coming from Electronic Arts by next Christmas is FIFA Soccer, the Ultra 64 installment in the much-heralded soccer series. Finally, the Great One will hit the 3D ice for the Ultra 64 this summer in a still untitled Wayne Gretzky hockey game from Time Warner Interactive. Spoiler alert, it's called Wayne Gretzky Hockey.
And it sucks.
These 3 titles bring the number of Ultra 64 games in development to 24 and counting. Price cut imminent for SNES games? Rumors swirled over the internet just before Christmas that Nintendo was about to announce a significant price cut for SNES games in the US. The speculation came after Nintendo announced that in February it will cut the prices of its Super Famicom, Japanese SNES, games by 23% in order to keep them significantly cheaper than the Ultra 64 games. The fees that Nintendo charges third-party game manufacturers will also be cut by about 30%, so prices on third-party Super Famicom games should also fall as companies pass on those savings. Unfortunately, at press time, Nintendo had not made a similar announcement regarding SNES games and continued to deny rumors that it would.
And eventually that would lead to a SNES version of Frogger that came out in 1998.
Yeesh, gross.
Yeah.
And last but not least, Atari cuts prices, eyes other platforms. Atari also moved to bolster its Christmas sales, cutting prices on the Jaguar to $99 in mid-December. The company will likewise begin publishing titles for other platforms by early spring, according to a story by Wire Weekly. Although Atari still plans to release 20 Jaguar titles in 1996, it will produce PC, Mac, PlayStation, and Saturn games to garner additional revenue. On the downside, Atari confirmed that it laid off its in-house development staff and will now utilize outside developers to create its products. The company's VR gaming headset has also ended up on the cutting room floor after Atari found that gamers were becoming woozy when using it. Guess what, Atari? They're still woozy, so you should have just released it.
So a $99 Jaguar? I guess they did the math.
Ah, well
No,
done.
I like
Well
what you did
done.
there. I like what you did there. Hot at Blockbuster this month on the PlayStation was Destruction Derby, Twisted Metal, NBA In the Zone, NFL Game Day, Loaded, the original Tekken, NHL Face-Off, Warhawk, Philosoma, and Revolution X. For the Saturn, Virtua Fighter 2, Virtua Cop, Sega Rally Championship, NHL All-Star Hockey, Off-World Interceptor Extreme, Quarterback Attack, Gen War, Daytona USA, Virtual Racing, and Galactic Attack. For the Genesis, we have NBA Live 96, Revolution X, Toy Story, Gargoyles, WWF WrestleMania. Who's renting Toy Story from Blockbuster? Earthworm Jim 2.
I bet Blue did.
No, not even I would sink that low.
Your parents didn't rent it for you?
By then, I was 15 and far too cool to be seen renting Toy Story. Are you kidding me?
Secretly, Dad, can you go rent this for me? Just don't tell anybody. Spot goes to Hollywood. TNN Outdoor Bass 96. People are renting fishing games. Wow. Real Monsters and PGA Tour 96. And last but not least, for the Super NES, NBA Live 96, Donkey Kong Country 2, Revolution X, Toy Story, really? Gargoyles, Mega Man X3, Killer Instinct, PGA Tour 96, Real Monsters, and Final Fight 3.
Man, I would love to go back and buy a copy of Mega Man X3 at retail price.
I would just take it, rent it, not take it back.
Exactly, right?
Yeah. All right, kids, I got a jet. I'm heading to my first Olympics in Atlanta, and boy, oh boy, is it going to be a blast.
Oh. Really?
That joke bombed.
Yeah.
Both of you.
I'll see you in hell, Donnie.
I got my Dune popcorn bucket already ready.
All right. Thank you for listening to episode 113 of Gamers Week podcast. And a big thank you to the Retro Game Club podcast, Love Retro BTW, and A Gamer Looks at 40 podcast for sponsoring this episode. Don't forget to check out their links in the show notes. If you want to connect with Gamers Week, follow us on Twitter at Gamers Week PC. Watch us on Twitch at twitch.tv/Gamers Week podcast. Email us at gamersweekpodcast@gmail.com. Visit our merch store at gamers-week-podcast.creator-spring.com. Or if you want to do it the easy way, follow the link in the show notes. And last but not least, join us on Patreon at patreon.com/gamersweek. Finally, since you made it all the way to the end of this episode, please leave us a rating and a review to let us know how we did. We really do value your feedback. And while you're there, consider subscribing on iTunes, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice.
If you could pick one adult toy to add to the piano, what would be your choice?
Have you ever seen The Naked Gun 2.5?
Yeah, years ago.
When Frank and his partner go into the sex shop.
Vaguely.
For me, it would be the machine that his partner picks up, and it looks like a chainsaw. But it's got a rubber hand on the end of it, and with a finger. And I would have that on the piano keys. Just that's my choice.
It's art!
All right. On that note, good night, everybody.
Good night.
But nobody else is going to say theirs?
No. Can't follow that one, man.
Nope, I think you win. No, it's not. Shut up.
Welcome to Gamers Week Uncut.
Welcome to Gamers Week Uncut.
Welcome to Gamers Week Uncut, patrons with benefits. This is the unscripted, patron-only bonus cast with less editing and more dirty jokes. We don't know where the conversation will go, but we're sure it will be weird.
This fish just went right on my nipple. And I'm just like,
I Google Street Fighter 6. The first search result that comes up is people think they can see Ryu's in the Street Fighter 6 reveal.
Listen up here, kids. You're not going to want to get one of those VD STDs things, right? Make it fall off. When you go, grab a pro. You'll be doing it for America.
that was perfect.
If you want to hear weekly episodes of our patron-only bonus cast, join us at patreon.com/gamersweek.